Hey guys, I know we've all been there before in which we went into a really negative spiral filled with difficult thoughts and difficult emotions, and we find it hard to get out of this spiral. I want to share with you an effective tip that'll help you to get out of this spiral sooner in such a way that is authentic and unforced. Negative spirals appear in cycles. When they do appear, we find ourselves get deeper and deeper into the negative spiral as if we're sucked into it. And when we are really deep in the negative spiral, at this point, it's really tough. It's hard to force ourselves to get out of it with alternative thoughts and trying to make ourselves feel differently. So it's importantly during this phase to validate our own experience. After this phase of validation, there comes another phase in which we slowly start to release ourselves from the negative cycle. And we start to naturally come up with coping statements, alternative thoughts, and also a broader insight on the matter and also our life at large. And these thoughts are really authentic and they really do bring us up and they're not forced. You really wish the next time you have the negative spiral that you could remember all these thoughts that you have that help you to be able to come up. So I've developed a tool that people found to be effective. I had a lot of positive feedback on this, which is that you actually keep a note card, and during this phase in which you're coming up from this negative spiral, you actually write down on a card what your coping statements are, what your alternative thoughts are, what your insights and broader perspectives are. And you do this every single time that you come up from a spiral, such that it's almost like a memory card. And you could actually keep this with you. And so that when you go through a negative spiral again, you pull out the card and it could really help. It is important to note not to create this card when you are in that really deep negative state. Because usually the thoughts that we try to tell ourselves during this state tend to be rather critical, even though we're trying to help ourselves. They're trying to force us to think and feel differently. Also, another time to not write on this card is during one of your normal phases in your life in which you may be feeling even positively about things. That's not going to be helpful too, because you're not going to find those thoughts to be believable. You're not going to have buy-in for those kind of thoughts. Use the thoughts you have when you're going through that negative spiral, and during that time in which you are naturally coming up from it, you have the energy then to be able to write on a card what your coping statements are. You're not going to have the energy when you're really having difficult thoughts. Now, the next time you have a negative spiral, you have all the tools at your disposal, all the beneficial thoughts that you have that have really helped you to get out of negative spiral. Just remember, this is an authentic and organic process, so I don't want you to force yourself out of it. When you're deep into it, you could start validating your experience first. And in fact, on a card, you could write down some of your validating statements as well, not just the coping statements and alternative thoughts. But you have all these thoughts all in one place. Now, the reason why this works is something called the memory network. Each time you get into a negative spiral, your mind remembers the last time it was in a negative spiral. It brings out all the thoughts and emotions you have then. And that's why that spiral could be experienced so intensely. When you create a card like this, in which you write down these positive thoughts and emotions and insights, especially during that coming out of that spiral process, you're reinforcing that phase of the spiral in which you're releasing tension, because you're bringing all these thoughts together into one. And by writing them into a memory card, you start to remember better and reinforce your memory of these thoughts and emotions such that they start to become more a part of you and more a part of the spiral process. This also really helps other people too. I ran support groups in the past in which I introduced this idea. People were processing difficult emotions together, and when they start to mention about their positive coping strategies and thoughts and emotions and insights, I actually created the card for each person. When they're talking about it, I wrote it down and I gave each person their own individual card, and people really loved the exercise. Do you ever have that feeling of overwhelmed with what you need to do or have to do? Or you're overwhelmed with how far you are from a distant goal that you want to accomplish. Or you may be overwhelmed because you want to feel a certain kind of way